the market by the central banks if their balance sheet is already, let's say, overburdened by the past debt. So there is the need to reduce the balance sheet of central banks, but at the same time, this means that we have to reduce. Why do we need to reduce the central bank's balance sheet? Because that is too much linked to sovereign debts which are linked to current expenditures. What the central banks did in the last few years was buying government bonds linked to the rising expenditure, current expenditures. So the idea is that at the same time, when we reduce the balance sheets from one side, we can increase that balance sheet without reducing it too much, increasing long-term projects, long-term bond linked to specific projects. What kind of specific projects? Of course, specific projects linked to the provision of global public goods. And this is possible if we think in terms of two basic ideas. First of all, the euro has a role in this, because the European Union is lagging behind, let's say. Of course, it's much more advanced than other regions in the world, but it's lagging behind in the financing of the Green Deal, despite the Next Generation EU, despite several other points. The European Union is still lagging behind, and it can be done quite a lot of things. It can increase the debt, it can increase bonds linked to specific projects of the Green Deal, and this can be helped by the European Central Bank, because the European Central Bank, which is trying to reduce the balance sheets on sovereign bonds on one side, can help long-term perspective projects on the other side. So it might, and in a way it is already ready, because they said it, Lagarde said it, and also the executive board took some decisions in this direction to finance green bonds. And there's a second aspect, which is not linked to Europe in the specific in this specific field, but is linked to the multilateral system, to the IMF, to the International Monetary Fund, which is increasing the role of SDRs, special drawing rights. I don't know if you are familiar with special drawing rights. It is a currency basket, a basket currency, let's say, which is used by the IMF, the National Monetary Fund, as a unit of account. But at the same time, it's a reserve asset. It's considered a reserve asset. There was a huge amount of issue of SDRs in August 2021, but being a reserve asset, SDR are frozen in the central bank's balance sheets. One thing that we can do is trying to get this SDRs out of the balance sheets of the central banks and put them into the market and put them at the service of financing Green Deal and other global public goods. And there is a potential for this in the intermediation, in the role of multilateral development banks. The IMF has some, they are called prescribed holders. There are some institutions which are prescribed holders of SDR, which means that this kind of institution can trade SDRs, can use SDRs, can channel SDRs for development projects. So the idea is to collect SDRs given by the IMF to single nation states, or maybe to the European Union as a whole, and transfer them to multilateral development banks in order to finance specific projects linked to global public goods, such as, for example, the green transition. Why multilateral development banks are particularly fit for this process? Well, there are some ideas about that, because there are, well, the stakeholders, the shareholders, actually, of the multilateral development banks are nation states. So they are probably most likely to be ready to do this channeling of SDRs into development projects. At the same time, multilateral development banks are mostly based on a regional level. So this might also increase regional development, regional integration, not just in Europe, where we already have some kind of, not complete as we know, but we have some regional integration, but in Africa, for example, or in Latin America, or in other regions of the world. They are also able, as they have as shareholders, nations, states, they are also they are very much able to connect the private with the public sector, which is a crucial aspect to finance this kind of global public goods, because we cannot expect to finance them only raising public money. There should be some involvement of private money. And this is one of the reasons why multilateral development banks can play a key role in this. And the final point is that being represented by nation states, they are probably mostly able to condition their channeling of finances, because channeling finances from supranational or transnational or international organization always brings with it some conditionality. And accepting conditionality is always a crucial problem, is a key issue. So multilateral development banks can, let's say, help digest this kind of conditionality much easier than other international institutions. So my concluding remarks, to stay in the 15 minutes, is that the current structure of the IMS is completely flawed, but at the same time, we have some chances. The first chance is to return to multilateralism. And in order to explore this, we have to increase the spending on this kind of issues from the European Union and from the IMF. Of course, it's difficult to do it now, but at the same time, while there is this evolution, while pending, let's say, the reform of the international monetary system, we can do something now, which is channeling SDR through multilateral development banks in order to finance specific development projects. Thanks a lot.
Many, many thanks, Professor Masini, for your presentation. It was very rich, a lot of questions, in particular for me as a lawyer, but I'm sure that having in mind the audience you have in this small group coming from different continents, and committed federalists, all of them, because I see very good friends among us. So we will have a very rich discussion, I'm sure. I would like just to underline the gaps you identify already to the current international financial system, but you came with a very concrete proposal, how to go ahead in having in mind the ongoing initiatives at the European level, but how to explore possibilities with the multilateral developing bank and the tools, the SDR you mentioned, to go further and contribute also to regional, let's say, particularities we can have when we discuss climate change and environmental. And of course, the core of all the discussion, it's this notion of global public goods, which is really one key issue for all of us and one of the big challenges for the next period. So saying that, I will give the floor to Guido Montani for the second presentation. Guido, you have the floor.
Thank you. I am happy that Fabio Masini has explained the need to exploit the possibility to utilize special drawing rights as an international money, as a supranational money. Now my task is to explain or to try to explain better why we can exploit this possibility in order to finance and the amount of money we need in order to have a global Green Deal, if you want. The first point for me is a clarification, a terminology clarification, because I use two terms like governance and globalization, global economy, and so on, which are ambiguous terms because they were entering into the use, international use, during the last decade of the last century. And but they have two meanings. One is that you can talk about governance or global things concerning international relations. And another thing is that you can utilize the same terminology in order to create supranational goods. So that is a problem. My approach is that usually I talk about international institutions in order to provide if there is a way to transform them in supranational institutions. The example is very clear. I can take the monetary union in Europe. At the beginning, you had a set of countries having national money. They decided to create only one European money and one central bank. That is very clear. That is supranational. That is supranational governance, because it's not only the power of the central bank to decide the monetary policy, but there is should be an agreement with the Commission, with the European Parliament, with the Council, and so on. So there is a governance. So that is to clarify the terminology, which is important in order to avoid discussion about this point. The second clarification is the need to collect the idea of money and so the reform of International Monetary Fund with finance. That is, let me say, something at the university you have to teach to students, but I repeat here, it is my task also. You know, if you you should consider the free function of the money, which is the unit of account. Of course, you have a dollar, you have a euro, but you can have a cigarette, for instance, in the concentration camp. They utilize the cigarette as a money. The second point is that you need money. The function of the money is a means of exchange. You utilize money in order to buy commodities. The second function of money is the store of value. I can decide not to spend money today in order to spend my money next month, next year, and so on. So that is a store of value. And what is the connection? The connection, according to me, very simple, is the banking system. You know what is a bank. If you think at the rich merchant in the medieval age, like the Florentine, like the Fugari in Germany and so on, they had a very quantity of money, of gold and silver in their coffer. But they had also the possibility to utilize this quantity of gold and silver in order to lend the money for a rate of interest. So they had the possibility to get something, to get a profit lending the money. As if you lend the money to an entrepreneur, to a businessman, so he can invest, he can transform this money and pay back the interest. So you see that the circuit of the money and the finance and the functioning of the real economy. So that is a premises, if you want, but excuse me if that is a too elementary introduction, but I think that it is better to clarify some concept in order to go on. Now, the main point is how to finance the Green Deal, the global Green Deal today. On that point, I was obliged to take some result, some study made by the Nicholas Stern and his group of economists, because it is not something a single researcher can do, like me. They presented a very good report at the conference in Egypt last year, Sharm el-Sheikh. The report is a very big report, many pages, but there are some very interesting calculations. The most important one is that the quantity of money, the quantity of investment you need in order to have as a target to respect the limit of the Paris Agreement of 2019. That is 1.5 degrees Celsius or maximum 2 degrees Celsius. So that is the target of their study and the target for the year 2030. So 7-8 years. Their result, in order to understand their result, there is two further questions to be explained, which can be called the magic of a financial multiplier. I explained that the bank can lend money, and here you have the first multiplier, because people put their saving in the bank, but the bank doesn't, the bank utilize this kind of money in order to lend. How much can the bank lend? That is the first multiplier. Usually, that is the traditional accounting. With $1, €1, you can lend for €5 or $5. So that is the first multiplier. There is a second multiplier. And the second multiplier is that if you lend $1 to an entrepreneur, let me say $1, $100, you don't need to lend $100, but only, let me say, $20 or less. Why? Because you can improve, you can asset, you can spur investment, you can give the possibility to invest, reducing the risk of investment, only reducing the risk. So here you have a second multiplier. The second multiplier is 5, more or less 5. So 5 and 5 means 25. And that is the total amount of money the Multilateral Development Bank Masini was talking about can lend. According to the final calculation of the equipe of Nicholas Stern, they find that we need 40 billion of dollars per year in order to increase the rate of investment of 2 or 3% to 3% of a global Green Deal. So that is a big amount of investment. But you remember that in order to make this calculation, you have to consider the technology, the risk, the sector of the economy which should prevail or not. In any case, you need so $40 billion at the end per year in order to provide the total amount with the multiplier I was talking about, the double multiplier I was talking about, which will provide $1 trillion. So 40 billion, 1 trillion. That is the result of a study of Nicola Stern and his equipe. And I think it is a very important amount of money, which show I don't make comparison with was, for instance, the loss and damage promised and so on by a national government today, but you see that it is a very amount of money, much more than the national government today provide for the fight against climate change. The third point, and after I conclude, is the role of the International Monetary Fund as a central bank, as a world central bank. Of course, the role of in such a case, you can say that the role, if the role the International Monetary Fund can utilize the special drawing rights as a reserve money in order that all the bank and all the people can utilize, all the business can utilize this new kind of money. And you remember that the basket of a special drawing right is consists of dollar, pound sterling, euro, yen, and yuan. So the Japanese and the Chinese money. So that are 5 money. And in such a case, you can say that the board of the International Monetary Fund can be considered as a supranational board, and you have a supranational institution. Of course, it is a board which has an enormous quantity of responsibility and power. You can discuss if that is a good idea or not. I think that it is a good idea to do that. What I make an example of what you can achieve with this kind of reform. Only 2 examples. The first one is that you can drastically reduce the rate of interest for poor countries, which are obliged to issue their debt in a foreign currency, for instance, in dollar. But you can ask Ghana or Nigeria and so on to utilize their money. No, they cannot utilize their money because nobody wants in the world. The finance will demand enormous rate of interest for them. So they have the possibility to issue their debt at a very low rate of interest, like the United States, Europe, Japan, and so on. So that is an enormous advantage for the equality, the redistribution of income in the world economy. The second example I can provide is concerning the technology. In order to fight climate change, you need new technology. One of the technology I consider is the so-called carbon capture and sequestration. You know, carbon capture, that means you have to, people provide, the proposal is that you can take from the air carbon dioxide and put carbon dioxide underground, for instance, in oil reserve and so on. That is very important because that reduce, and you have a technology in order to reduce carbon dioxide from the air. But now that technology is not provided because national government do not find an interest in financing this kind of research, and for businessmen is not convenient because they can, of course, it is important to reduce carbon dioxide from the air, but they cannot find a profit for that. So there is a second technology connected with this, which is called direct air capture plant, so DAC, which is the idea is to use carbon dioxide and to sell carbon dioxide, so to find some customer or some people utilizing this kind of carbon dioxide. For instance, it is important for to raise, to grow plant in greenhouses. So there is some other example, but I give only this kind of example in order to show that it is important to provide a carbon price, a world carbon price. That is one important point, because according to the World Bank, today we have 73 different carbon prices. So you see that is a mess, a terrible mess for businessmen, because the carbon price is essential in order to consider if you make an investment which can provide a profit or not. But if you have 73 or more prices, that is not a target, is not something you can take for your calculation and for your budget. So the problem is that if we have an international money, a supranational money like the special drawing rights, you can have only one price for carbon, and you can fix a price which can make convenient to make certain investment. So the calculation made by the World Bank and other association is that more or less a carbon price of $100 or 100 euro is enough in order to make profitable this kind of investment like direct air capture plant. So you see that the link between the bank, the international fund as a supranational bank, and the functioning of the economy, and the possibility to reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The last point, and I conclude, is a consideration. There is a paper provided by the International Monetary Fund, very interesting, showing that what is the minimum amount of country which can provide a common platform, a common price. Now, the calculation of the International Monetary Fund is very simple. China, 32% of pollution, of carbon price, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. United States, 14%. India, 9%. European Union, 8%. To sum up these four emitters, you have 63%. according to the International Monetary Fund, that is a snowball effect. That is, if you have more than 60% of country deciding to have a common price of carbon, the other country will follow. So we arrive at 100% of countries. Consider that the G20, with the G20, you arrive more or less to 90% of the pollution. So I conclude with only a political consideration. Fabio Masini rightly said that we should go back to multilateralism. I think that the reform we are proposing, that is the reform of International Monetary Fund, in order to find the finance for the Global Green Deal, provide a first step for a reform of the United Nations, because the United Nations is in crisis, and a way in order to go back to multilateralism is very simple, is that you need an agreement between China, United States, India, and European Union. That is the political core of the Global Green Deal from a political point of view. So I think that we are not proposing something which is not, let me say, pragmatic. We are pragmatic, and we propose something which can be done immediately if there is the political will. I stop here.
Many, many thanks, Guido. I think your presentation was extremely rich and explained really with a very concrete example. You gave, you mentioned several studies and figures to explain the complexity of the problem. But I will stay to your conclusion, because from my point of view, it's relevant and it's make the link with the previous presentation from Professor Masini, the need to reform to the supranational institution, the need to have to start discussing in more concrete terms, to be pragmatic in the approach we will follow, but also to be concrete. What kind of reform we can promote? What are the risks to go ahead for the next step? How we can use the new tools, the technology, what we can really put as a priority in order to go ahead and start, open the discussion now, having in mind that, for instance, for us as Europeans, we spend a lot of time to discuss, to have the Green Deal and to be very concrete in our proposal and to estimate the cost. So we have really to share this experience, but be a little more ambitious and go further, because this is not enough now. And this is really the main objective of our action and our initiatives as federalists, the need to reform institution in order to go ahead and have a kind of sustainability and respond to the big challenge we have now with the climate change. So I will open the floor. I would like to have views for colleagues coming from different continents in order to fit the discussion with their regional also experience. And then, of course, the floor is open, but be concrete when you take the floor and present yourself. So who would like to, Amy, if you can help me, who would like to take the floor to start the debate, the discussion? Shall we start with Camila, Latin America?
Camila, do you have a question? Daphne, you mentioned that you had some questions for Guido. So why don't you start us off as we get ready for more questions?
Yes, I will start, you know, I mentioned that I'm a human rights lawyer. So I will start with what we have in the European Charter of Fundamental Rights. We have a general provision that we didn't use till now, just to explain that the debate on public goods, as mentioned by Professor Masini, it's really a key issue for the next period. We have faced already the COVID crisis and then the war in Ukraine, in Europe, but we still have no clear policy approach concerning the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights provision, access to services of general economic interest. At the European level, we make a choice not to use the terminology public goods. Although from my point of view, this is really an issue reflecting the 90s when the first, the charter was drafted. And there is no conflict now, as Professor Masini mentioned already, between public and private sector, because both, they have to work together in order to provide access to the globally of public goods, and health and the environment, it's public goods. Both they are linked, because a bad huge environmental crisis and climate change has an impact to the health of the population around the world. So, however, the discussion how to finance all these public goods, it's still very, very difficult to advance. I think the fact that there is now a political will among, let's say, the majority of the member states of the European Union now, but also globally, to face climate change, pollution, biodiversity challenges, shows that we can start discussing access to public goods from to respond to this crisis, because this concern around global all of us, and it's really a big challenge needed now to have to start find compromises and replies. So we can be ambitious, but we have also to respond to the crisis and be ready to come with proposal based on national or regional experience, but it's time now to be a little concrete and start discussing concrete issues. So if we don't have the framework of an international multilateral governance to respond to this, let's start working on this. And let's also be realistic in the way that we are ready to finance with concrete instruments all this political, let's say, objective or the challenges we face. Otherwise, we will stay very theoretical, and we didn't have any impact as a civil society organization pushing for global solution as a federalist. That's a general comments from my side. I hope that someone would like to take the floor and raise a question from our speakers. Shall we change continent? Kennedy?
Yeah.
Kennedy?
Hello, everyone. My name is Kennedy.
Hi, Kennedy.
I hope that you can hear me. Okay, so I have a question for Fabio regarding the special drawing rights. You've mentioned that the IMF is like the World Central Bank, but the special drawing rights are in the central banks of the individual states. So if we wanted, or for example, in the approach that you have given, where these special drawing rights are being funded through multilateral development agencies, who takes the initiative to take out the money? Is it IMF or is it individual member states? And my second question is for Montani regarding the carbon pricing. How can we create a carbon price? Is it by unanimity, or as you've mentioned, is it just the G20 countries deciding a price that everybody else will have to adopt? Otherwise, it's a very good discussion, and thank you so much for inviting me here.
Thanks, Kennedy. So I give the floor first to Professor Masini and then to Professor Montani to reply to your question.
Maybe we can collect more questions if there are any.
No, excellent idea. I don't know who would like to have the floor now and raise another question.
Professor Masini, I would like to know what problems you foresee for climate financing, given the current inequalities in the international monetary system.
Let's try to reply to these two questions from Kennedy and Emmy, and see if other friends, they would like to raise more specific questions.
Okay, so you suggest I try to reply first. Okay. Yeah. First to Kennedy. Kennedy, that is the major problem concerning this mechanism. This is exactly what we, as CSF, Center Studies on Federalism, tried to do. We published 2 years ago a paper in which we suggested that the European Union should collect all the SDRs devoted to the single member states and trade them with the African multilateral development banks. So it means the African Development Fund and the African Development Bank. Both of them are prescribed holders, which means that they can use and channel this kind of SDRs to other things. So basically, it's probably think tanks who have to take the initiatives. Because if we wait for single state to take the initiative, it will be very difficult. At the same time, is also, of course, manifest that there must be some political will. And this kind of political will can either come from the European, for example, institutions. The European Commission might do quite a lot of things for this, because they can decide, okay, so let's all together collect our SDRs that are frozen in our central bank's accounts, and we don't do anything with them because we don't need them for financing structural disequilibria in the balance of payments. And let's use them for financing with a multiplier effect that also Guido suggested, to develop some kind of specific strategic public goods at the global level or the African level or wherever else. So that might be an interesting initiative from the European Commission or Union anyway. Otherwise, there must be a group of countries, relevant group of countries, or group of relevant countries, for example, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, I don't know, or at the global level, China, the United States, India, and again, probably the European Union that say, okay, we don't need this kind of reserve asset. Let's put them into development projects. So it must be, of course, a political process, and there must be a political responsibility to be taken up by somebody, either a supranational institution or by some relevant national government. To come to Amy, the problems in financing global public goods or the Green Deal linked to this inequality, it's exactly the paper that we wrote together with Guido. I mean, the main problem is political. This is also the conclusion that Guido drew about that. I mean, if there is a political will, the technicalities will be solved somehow. I'm sure about that. So the problem is to make things in a way that this kind of solution emerges as the only one, or as the most plausible one, or as the most incentivizing one for the whole world. And to have this, we need probably to have an increasing crisis, climate crisis. I'm afraid that we have to be pragmatic also in this kind of attitude. Let's say, I mean, the pandemic was an enormous chance because the pandemic made people understand, people and government, of course, understand that there is some problem which is not just national, but which is transnational, which spills over in other directions, which is not just the national boundaries. At the same time, the climate crisis is another great crisis, which probably can help understand or make people a bit more aware about what is at stake, and that we need some kind of supranational level to tackle this kind of public good. Let me just reply also to your, Daphne, to your, not question, but I mean to your comment, to your remarks. We had already the chance to speak about this kind of issue, that, I mean, we have to stop thinking in terms of public goods being only national, especially us. I mean, as federalists, we should stop thinking about public goods as national public goods. Public goods are multi-layered in their nature. Already Lionel Robbins, which is one of our founding intellectual, let's say, forefathers, said this: there are local public goods, there are regional public goods, national public goods, global public goods. And for each layer of public good, there must be some kind of authority, institution, collective decision-making mechanism, or call it however you want. But we need some kind of not national collective decision. And this is why, I mean, I think we should really think in terms of multi-layer governance, because we have multi-layer problems to be solved.
May I?
Yes, please.
No, sorry.
Guido, yes, please.
Yeah, because there was a question of who is fixing the price of carbon dioxide. You know, one certainty, one very step forward is to have a common price. So, of course, it is difficult to say now who will be the governance of the World Central Bank, the International Monetary Fund reformed. I talk about the possibility to have a board of governors with the five money they are managing now. But of course, that is not enough, because you should have a link more wider, because you need some rules in order to manage the money at the world level. But let me make a very simple example of the agricultural price in Europe before and after the creation of the monetary union. I was a young economist at the time, in the 70s, when there was a big crisis of the common market, because you had fluctuation among the European money, and some days you have milk, for instance, export of milk from Italy to Germany. After 1 month, you have the export of milk from Germany to Italy. Because when you change the rate of exchange, of course, the price changes. So that was a mess. Now, with the euro in the market, if the price is made by the competition of the businessmen, you have the same price, more or less, in Paris, in Rome, in Madrid, and so on, for a certain commodity. But for the concerning some price for a very important goods, like agricultural product, which is very important for poor people and so on, this price is decided at the European level every year. There is some agreement about the price, for instance, for milk, for bread, and so on. So that is an example which show the possibility to exploit a common market and how to can provide, in a certain sense, this kind of policy is to provide a public good in Europe, which is the stability of the price and the possibility to have a fair price for every people.
Many thanks, Guido. I think that this is true. We advance, but there are a lot of obstacles, as mentioned already in previous replies from Professor Masini. If there is a need to have a political will, but climate change, let me just a general comment. Climate change will have also other impacts, people mobility and forced displacement. This is a key priority for the European leaders in view of the next year, in particular next year election. So it will be really a key element and motivation to start changing or put among the priorities of the next Commission agenda all these issues we discuss this afternoon. Saying that, I would like to give the floor to Haralambos Pipos from Athens, who is really a great expert of energy. So I'm sure having in mind his experience at national, European and international level, he will come with some interesting points and probably questions. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm here. Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and warm congratulations for your excellent initiative and also for the excellent distinguished speakers contributed by now in this respect. What I would like to add at this stage is that all previous proposals and excellent ideas given, on my opinion, are based very accurately on the still published by the European Council of Foreign Relations paper on green industrial development. In this respect, I fully agree, and I believe all energy experts in the Union, and not only in the Union and the European Union, could support this. I mean the ideas for international cooperation, for a broader role of energy, European Investment Bank and IMF, also the role of the guidelines of the World Trade Organization, and of course, to commit in every case all this effort in the frame of these efforts to the UN Climate Convention. But in this respect, I'll be very brief. I should add, as an old expert in the Europeans in the European energy market and aspects. 3 points. Based on the above, I should mention that we further need to develop energy infrastructure. When speaking about green development in the Union, it has to do mainly with further development of electricity grids, because there is not a balance between North, Mid-Europe and South in this respect, and we need that infrastructure to be developed further just to use in economic terms renewables, for example, and not only renewables. The second point is that in this respect, we should take into strong consideration, serious consideration, the energy supply issues, the security of energy supply issues of the Union in the frame of geopolitical and geostrategic dimensions, because we are not alone. As all previous wise speakers told before, we have to do also with the UN, WTO, IMF, etc. In this respect also, we need one EU voice on energy, specifically on energy, at the national, regional, EU, and international level. Last but not least at this stage, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity, I think that we should take into serious consideration also the transatlantic cooperation. Also, the Southeast Mediterranean Energy Coalition and Cooperation, still working, of course with some problems, but still working in the frame also of the transatlantic cooperation. And of course, to mention and to take into serious consideration in this respect, the EU Hydrogen Coalition chaired by Mr. Hadjimarkakis, the European Union excellent initiative on the promotion of hydrogen. Because, for example, some of our member states are not dynamically or at all participated by now in this hydrogen coalition of the European Union. And these European Union efforts play a vital role for the further promotion of green industrial development in our union. Thank you very much indeed.
Many thanks for your intervention. I think it's explained that even at the European level, there are a lot of progress needed, in particular because we don't have a common energy policy. So how we can promote standards at an international level and probably promote cooperation, because we need to promote cooperation at international level, because as we mentioned at the beginning, fighting climate change and pollution and loss of biodiversity, it's a global challenge. So we need to work globally and convince. So we have difficulties after so many years to set up some common rules at the European level. So, well, people, they consider that we are very well advanced, but this is the reason as federalists, European federalists, we call for treaty change immediately, because there is a need to go further in a completely different way on certain aspects, and probably speed up the whole governance we would like to have as federalists in particular. But the climate change has this global dimension. So we have really to start at the same time developing very concrete ideas to promote solution, or start discussing solution at a global level. So I don't know if our friends from Africa, they would, from Asia now, Hem, would you like to take the floor, share views with us? Hem, did you follow us? I don't know if the connection is good. And if there are other friends that would like to take the floor and make statement or comments or share or ask questions to the speakers. I don't see people. They would like to interfere. I don't know if the two speakers would like to make some, let's say, closing remark for this event, and see how it will work for the next step regarding future initiatives as a follow-up of this starting event. I will give the floor to the speaker to Professor Masini and Montani for closing remarks then.
No, not just for closing remarks, but I mean, I was just trying to follow up on what Haralampos, right? Or something similar. Haralampos said that the problems concerning the European Union in financing and in providing European public goods, which is exactly a testimony of what I was saying at the global level. I mean, we also have the same problems that there is at the international level, because we also have a collective action problem, as you know, because our decision-making system is mostly relying on unanimity, it's mostly relying on compromises, or it's mostly relying on struggles between national interests, or alleged, let's say, national interests, because in the end, probably the interests of European citizens are quite homogeneous, that the interests of the national governments apparently are very much diverging from one another. So we also have this kind of problem in terms of collective action problem, at the same time in financing global regional public goods. And you are right. I mean, we are exactly talking now about what we had already been talking about 70 years ago, because we are now talking about the energy union, which was one of the main points of Monnet and Pierre Uri, who were drafting the SPAC report and the memoranda of 1955 of the energy union and so on and so forth. We forgot about that. We are again talking about a security and defense policy, common, single, which dates back to, again, 1952, 53, 54, and then it was over when the French National Assembly refused to put it into the agenda and ratify it. So we are back to old issues that we hoped that were already fixed 70 years ago. Unfortunately, we're not, so we are back then here again. This means that history is a very tricky process, that we cannot pretend that now things are going in a different way. Beware of thinking in deterministic terms that now we will have the energy union because there is the Russian problem, and that we will have the defense and security union because of, okay, we have the Russian problem. It might not be like that. Of course, there is an opportunity, and we should exploit it as much as possible as European federalists, but at the same time, it is not, let's say, cannot be given for granted that there will be a step forward. And this is the same problem that we have at the international level. We have an opportunity now because all central banks have to clean their balance sheets. Which means deleveraging on sovereign bonds and increasing to avoid a shock, a restrictive stance on economic policy. They have to increase it in other long-term projects. And this is the right moment in which we can ask them to finance green bonds. At the same time, there must be some kind of revision at the International Monetary Fund, because it's not sustainable any longer, this system in which excess saving countries like China, for example, finance the spending of the United States, because this is exactly what is happening right now. So we need to change this. At the same time, this gives an opportunity because it increases the role, for example, of the SDRs, which are a multi-currency basket currency. And so, I mean, there is a chance for that. Of course, we have to exploit it as much as possible from the political point of view and from the civil society point of view. That, I mean, if we don't exploit chances, if we don't exploit crises, I mean, what are we federalists for?
All right.
Many thanks for your intervention. Let's advance with the crisis. It's a great opportunity to go ahead as activists.
All right.
Guido, please.
Yes. No, only to say that the debate was very good, and I thank all the intervention, and I am in agreement with, I don't know if my pronunciation of your name, Charalampos, is correct, but I fully agree with what you said. The problem is that we are living in a very dangerous world in which, for instance, in Europe, we have a new war, a war which is a dramatic example of how humanity can be stupid, because you have people on this two camps killing each other. One someday probably we are able to take Ukraine and Russia together in an enlarged European Union, whatever you want, but we should overcome frontier. We should overcome hate between people, hating one the other, one willing to kill one the other. So that is the drama of our time, and there is a second drama. The second drama is that the climate change is a global bad, and are provoking much, every year more death than the year before. So that is one of the reasons I thought that a global Green Deal maybe is a good idea, because even if today we find so few people agreeing with the fact that the main countries, I talk about the four countries which can create the snowball effect for a global Green Deal. Because today, you know, there is the idea, and I think that is not correct, of a clash between democracy and autocracy. That is a false idea. We are not going to have a new Cold War, because humanity today is not the humanity of the last century. People understand that we can live in peace together. And so that is the problem. Let me say something about the further initiative for this kind of debate of topics. If you have given a look to my introduction to the Global Ventottene, I see in the invitation, I propose to divide the idea of a global Green Deal in some section. The brown deal, like the color, that is the war production. And I think that the next meeting could be about the reform, the ecological reform of the agricultural system, which is very important, more important than people say usually. After, there is the blue deal, that is the reform of the law of the sea, of the ocean, because oceans are polluted and are in danger of life and the biodiversity in the ocean and even in fresh water is today in a very dangerous situation. After the third meeting, I think, not the third, but that depends on what speaker I find, is the light blue deal, the sky, the outer space, because today you have a quantity of satellite and every thousand and thousand of satellite in the space, and there is that is a dangerous situation. There is no agreement, no law of the sky. So everybody, India is launching a satellite, Arab countries are sending satellite, Japan, and so on and so on and so on. There are many countries today which think that the future is the conqueror of the space, but that is a very dangerous situation. And the further point is to have an Earth constitution, because we should find an agreement, a pact between mankind and nature. So that is the problem of the rights of people and the rights of animals. And we should discuss. Daphne, she is an expert of rights. I think that she can give a contribution to that. The other field I like to explore is the geopolitical situation, that is what is the attitude of the United States for a global Green Deal, of the African Union, and I hope to organize soon a meeting for the African Union about this problem, Europe, China, and so on. So that is my program of the future webinar we started today.
Many thanks, Guido. Let me underline in 1 minute that all these initiatives have the support of UF presidents, the member of the European Parliament, Sandro Gocci, and of course from the World Federalist Movement, Fernando Iglesias, from the member of the National Parliament in Argentina. They both support our work. And one last point, both organizations, they will have the Congress this year. So this is a very, very important moment to speed up our efforts as federalists and as activists and experts in our policy area, each of us, and promote ideas for the European Federalists. We will have our Congress in the autumn. So public goods and the economic how we can finance now public goods in order even to fight inequalities in Europe, it will be a key issue. Probably we will have the opportunity to have at European level discussion, but we will have to promote this exchange between European federalists and world federalists because climate change, but not only climate change, other aspects are the core of the challenges we will face as citizens for the next period. And one last moment, of course, as a lawyer, I'm really, really keen to work and promote ideas for accountability at an international level in the area of environment, environmental crime, environmental court, but also in other policy areas linked with abuses like anti-corruption, International Court on Anti-Corruption. There are ongoing initiatives. The World Federalist Movement are very proactive, but the European Parliament also are very proactive. Our federalist friends in the European Parliament, Spinelli Group, are extremely active working on this topic. So I think we will continue. I would like to thank all of you, and in particular Professor Masini and Guido, who has the idea of go further and who work closely with all of us for the past December, the Montreux, the celebration of the Montreux anniversary, and who was a key point for putting together and working at a global level as European and global federalist, that it was a key moment for all of us, the event in the European Parliament. And Guido worked closely with, for months, promoting this idea. So many, many thanks, Guido, one more from my side, personally. And many thanks to Amy for all the support at the Secretariat of the World Federalist Movement, for supporting the organization of the event. That's all from my side. Many, many thanks. We will share, there will be a kind of summary of you have already the publication, but we will put together also the supporting messages from different personalities for the events and all these activities. That's all from my side. I would like to wish you from Brussels with the end of the afternoon, and see you soon, probably after the summer break. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.